On W Thistle. You're on 783 ABC Alice Springs. Now, it's been 3 years of community input, consultations, meetings, forums. I can throw out my thesaurus now because last night the actual plans for the CAD, that's Central Activity District, see, we're a little cooler than the cities, were released to the public at a presentation held by the Alice Springs Town Council. Sue Dugdale is the local architect who co-drew, presented the plans, is live in the studio, complete with drawings and sharp pencils. Good morning to you, Sue.
Good morning, Tatjana.
Now, the first question I have to ask, I guess it's the polarising one. Among the plans is, of course, the plan to get some traffic through the northern end of the Todmore. Maybe we should clear that up first.
Yes, this is one of 6 proposals that were presented last night, and we've called this particular project Open for Business, because we think the north end of the mall needs the businesses to open up to the mall, and it needs more people in the mall to make it work. There's been quite a few examples in other places in Australia and overseas that show that bringing traffic back into what were quite unsuccessful malls has been very successful in making them work again. But the key is to bringing the traffic in a very controlled way so that you balance the traffic and the pedestrians.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the proposals that came through, and the other one was the biodiversity corridor, which we could perhaps talk a little bit more about soon. So this has all been in the making for some time. You must have been really pleased to finally reveal them.
We have been, yes. We've been talking to various committees and steering groups and so on, but it's much more satisfying to present plans to the public.
Something else that happened last night for the first time was the website address that people can be a part of, connectingalice.com.au, which is now live if people want to interact and see these plans on the web.
Yeah, I'd really encourage people to go to the website. Most of the plans are on the website. Some still have to be put on, but more particularly a lot of the consultation and stories that were gathered during those years of consultation are on the website, and there's heaps of fascinating material, mainly assembled by Professor Paul Carter, who was working with us, and I think poking around on the website's really quite fascinating.
Is a good way to see it all, and we'll also give you some more details a little later on about where you can see these plans. 1300 019 783. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can put them to us. 1300 019 783. Now, this is a process, as I say, that sort of started back in 2008 as a bit of an election promise where $5 million worth of funding was announced to revitalise the CBD. Did you work to that budget, or did you sort of broaden the scope a little?
We were given a charter to work beyond the budget and then have the plans costed later on so we could see what could be afforded. It's a really great way to work because we looked really along the full length of the mall and identified a number of projects. And I think to do good creative work, you need to work in a free manner first and think of what's good for the town without thinking about the budget first. And then there is the inevitable budget step, which has now come into play, and a couple of projects have been selected from the wide range that we're presented.
I think something that I found quite interesting was that there are these core things that you've identified that we can discuss in a little bit more detail, but that there's also the chance for ripple projects to come out of that over the years as more funding is made available.
Yeah, when you're working on any part of the town, it's connected to the rest of the town. I guess it's a kind of social and economic ecology, if you like. It's a whole sort of system. So some fascinating things came up. And just as one example, one of the things that came up was someone identified that Alice Springs actually has a justice precinct. So that section of Parsons Street that has the historic courthouse, that's now a heritage building, it has the new courthouse, it has the police officers, and it has the lawns where people wait to go into the courthouse. That's all connected with justice, and so it's interesting to recognise those things about the town, and you see the town better when those things come to light.
There were some really interesting things about providing a sense of welcome and that you've arrived in the town, sort of going back from where the town council lawns start, perhaps widening the footpath across the road there and having some alfresco dining.
Yeah, there's really entry and welcome points at the north and south end of town, and the one at the south end of town is really the intersection with the traffic lights with Stock Terrace and Todd Street, and those council lawns that you arrive at are really important. That my office looks over those lawns, and they're really well used by tourists and local people, so it's good to see, and I think that it's important to maintain that open green space to identify your arrival and welcome into the central area.
So you're hoping to expand on the greenery that's there. So you've got the greenery of the council lawns, then across the road, widening the footpath, adding some more trees and shade. Shade was a big factor last night.
It was. I personally think that you should be able to walk around the central area of Alice Springs entirely in the shade. So I think, that should be our mission. And I think that should be through a variety of measures, planting trees, providing awnings to new and existing buildings.
Well, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, and the footpath widening is about making the town more urbane, particularly for pedestrians, so to make it a much nicer place. I think if anyone's walked along that western footpath of Todd Street across the road from the town council, you're always bumping into other people into those sandwich board signs. Another couple of metres on that footpath, I think, would serve it really well.
You're on 783 ABC Alice Springs Mornings. I'm speaking with Sue Dugdale, the architect who unveiled the plans for your CAD, that Central Activity District, that will hopefully be underway. The Alice Springs Town Council has approved a couple of projects. We'll hear about them next. Let's hear a little bit about what punter Pip heard last night.
I thought there were a lot of really innovative and inspirational concepts there, and I'm really happy to see more shade, more sinuous lines of pedestrian movement, and particularly the introduction of water elements, play elements and public art, which is great. My only major reservation is the notion of reintroducing vehicles to the northern area of the mall. It could possibly work if it was limited to slow drop-off areas in one-way traffic. But I do remember the mall when there was traffic, and it wasn't a particularly friendly place at all. I'm convinced that the main problem is that there is no engaging frontages with the commercial areas, and if there was a way of connecting the food court, which is totally enclosed, so that there was an inside and outside area on that edge, I think you'd see a lot more activity and people lingering in the area.
When you spoke, you mentioned an area in Fremantle. For those of us who haven't been, can you perhaps describe what you like about the area there that could be incorporated here?
Yeah, I come from Perth originally, and so I travel there often. There's a very large Asian food court in a pedestrian area close to a car park opposite the Fremantle markets, which are very popular. And the advantage of those food courts over the ones here is that there's an inside area that you can sit in if you want to have air conditioning and shelter, but it leads directly into a large outdoor seating area, and it engages with the pedestrian traffic and public activity area. If Alice Springs Town Council can look at trying to engage commercial enterprises and food activity in the northern area on the street, people will linger as they do in the southern area of the mall.
That's Pip there at last night's public meeting to unveil the plans for the Central Activity District here in Alice as part of the $5 million revitalisation plan, but we hope much more funding comes into it so that all of Sue Dugdale's plans are realised. Sue, Pip mentioned there the idea of active and passive street fronts, which I guess are a couple of buzzwords that people might not be familiar with. Could you explain them to us and how you incorporated those concepts?
Well, I think the shops fronting the mall that are part of the Alice Plaza shopping centre, I'd call passive, because they had the opportunity to open to the mall, but they've blocked off those windows, they've blocked off the street entries. It really doesn't work. It doesn't offer anything to the mall. I think Pip's idea of having the food court adjacent to that side of the mall is fantastic. I think that would be a really good synergy, and it would probably work well for the Alice Plaza shopping centre as well. I was interested that Pip mentioned in what she said that the successful food court she was describing in Fremantle is close to car parking, and I think that's really key. People want to, even if they don't end up parking close to the food court, they'll often do a drive-by and have a look and see if they can park, and that's part of what brings life to the place.
Yeah, something else that came up quite a lot was Parsons Street, and this is something that has been approved as well as the northern end traffic, is the biodiversity corridor. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, this is a concept developed by Mike Gillam and Doris Stewart, who also worked with us on the project. And it's a fabulous concept because a lot of people have recognised that the Todd Mall needs to connect more to the river, that the CAD needs to connect more to the river in general. And Parsons Street's one of the key sites for this to happen because it's a very broad street despite that block being quite short. And so what we've done is we've...
Yeah, Steve described it as somewhere you could land a plane, apparently.
A Boeing, that's right, yeah, quite easily. Yeah, I don't know about the length, but the width is there. So we propose reducing the traffic lanes to only 6 metres. This will leave about 4.5 metres of footpath on the ANZ Bankside, which is wider than it is now, and about 7 metres of footpath on the south side, which is the youth hostel and the old theatre side, which is a fabulous amount of space to work with. So you can do more than just put a paved footpath. So we're proposing a planter bed of a particular type, and we've drawn an example from Isfahan, which is an ancient town in Iran. So it's in an arid area, so it's a very good comparison. Isfahan's also on the World Heritage listing. And the planter beds are set slightly down from the street, and they're flood irrigated only intermittently. So it suits the kind of desert plants. You might just irrigate them once a week once the plants are established. And then the water can be drawn from the adjacent paved surfaces, and also, as Mike Gillam pointed out at the meeting last night, shade structures and nearby buildings can have water harvesting that could also contribute water to the street.
Yeah, just really utilising, some of the catchment that you could have from the roofs of the businesses, because that was an objection, I guess, that was raised, is where would the water come from, and if there's stagnant water, would it attract mosquitoes? But I understand with a constant flow, it would eradicate that.
Yeah, and it would just be a once-off flow, and then the remainder of the time it would be dry, so it would become an occasion as well. You might be there for the flow, and you might see it only once a week. The other key thing about Parsons Street is connecting that magnificent old tree in the second block of Parsons Street outside the old Commonwealth Bank back to the river, and to create a sight line between them. So all the intervention that we're proposing leaves that central space free, and then all the shade structures and new planting is to one side. So you'd have both a great viewing corridor that connects you to the river, but also provides plants which hopefully attract birds and animals, and also shade structures that incorporate art with this same biodiversity theme.
Because I think that's another thing to point out, is that you won't be removing any trees from Todd Mall, just perhaps I guess giving a dual purpose to some things as well, and adding more shade structure. And as you said last night, making some things work a little harder. So if you had a pole, putting a bin within that pole, or just making things work harder, as you said.
Yeah, it's really important. I'd really invite anyone to stand in that area near where the sails are and have a look at the sails and the space there. There's an incredible amount of junk. I did a count up once, and there's like about 50 things, like blocks of concrete holding cables, there's bins, there's seats, there's little kind of planter beds that don't really work.
You have to really watch where you're walking, don't you?
Yeah, you do, and it shouldn't be like that. You should have a much freer, more open space, but one that still provides the facilities that support the pedestrian environments, like seating and bins and shade.
So it's about a light footprint, I understand, but trying to make the most out of the money that you have. And when it comes to the public art as well, I understand that you're hoping to incorporate the stories of Alice Springs, and with Indigenous stories, settler stories, all that sort of stuff. How are you proposing to add that?
There's a cultural framework that was developed by Professor Paul Carter, but it's still wide open, which I see as a positive thing. So as part of developing the infrastructure, I think that what should happen is that opportunities for artists will be identified, and artists will be commissioned, and then the artists will be very free within that very, very broad cultural framework and set of stories to choose material to work with. So there's a lot of room for still creative work and interpretation to be brought into the content of the design.
There was a little bit of criticism about that concept. Leo Abbott was there last night. Let's hear a little bit from him.
Only question that I've got is how much consultation, just from hearing from some of the retail store owners here, they've never been consulted. But, I was very disappointed myself coming here to this so-called public forum and not seeing, heads of organisations from the Indigenous organisations. And, if you want community input, the council and organisations here, and plus, you know, other businesses here should be all part and parcel of the consultation process. So for me, coming to this meeting here, it is very disappointing for me to not see other community people here, Indigenous community people.
What do you think about some of the things that were presented in terms of linking Indigenous stories and place?
Well, that's another thing too, is that how much consultation's been around that too, you know, because has it been widely accepted and, you know, been approved by the wider Indigenous community to incorporate Indigenous culture into this? Because they were saying that a lot of the symbols mean a lot in the different areas here in Central Australia, but it needs approval from the wider community. And that's the biggest thing for me, you know, that, you know, people aren't being consulted, and I believe that there's a proper process, and, you know, people have been talking about having a proper consultation process, but it's not being done, and that's what I see here tonight.
That was Leo Abbott there, who is running for the CLP next year. Sue, what do you say to that if people feel that they still want to add something, particularly with the polarising issue, I guess, of that northern end of the mall being open to traffic?
Yeah, look, I think it's important to know that this project has only just been handed from the NT government, who've managed our consultancy, over to the town council, who are going to project manage it. And the town council have now instituted some public consultation and feedback, and last night's meeting was only the first part of that. So in around about, the time frames haven't been set, but in around about a couple of weeks there'll be a substantial ad in the Advocate that will say where all the plans can be reviewed, and there'll be several sites, and we'll give the address of the website, and they'll give a period of time in which feedback can be given, and they'll say how and where that feedback can be given. So really there's going to be a lot of opportunity still. So I'd encourage Leo to look at the plans and provide all the feedback he wants, and encourage other people to do the same.
And do that. There were plenty of other things incorporated for youth. As you pointed out, youth like to be sort of on the fringe of things. You sort of identified a different entryway to Anzac Oval, and some spaces that can again have that multi-purpose. So, you know, kids playing, but something different to look at. Did you want to talk about a couple of those things?
Yeah, it's. I think that young people are one of the most disenfranchised groups in the CAD area. You know, there's so many times when I've seen young people being escorted out of shopping centres by security guards and turned out of shops and looked at with suspicion and looked at as though they shouldn't be there. And really, they should be there. They should be welcome, and there should be facilities that suit them. The other thing is that the CAD is used differently at different times of the day and night. So there might be kids hanging around after school, and I know that kids hang around at night, and maybe, you know, some people think they shouldn't be there, but the fact is they are, so the place should work for them as well. But they use space differently. So we've spent a bit of time talking with Maddie Day, who's a consultant and who is working at the new Anzac Youth Hub, and that's been really great to open our minds to some of the possibilities and to foreseeing some of the examples of how this stuff works overseas.
I should make a quick clarification. I said that Leo Abbott was running for the CLP. That was my mistake. He's running as an independent at the next election and not as a CLP candidate. I should make that clarification. So if people want some more information, the site is already live. connectingalice.com.au if people want to see a little bit more. And for the town council position, Liz Martin presided last night, and here's a little bit from her.
We're going to do Project 4 and 5, which is the biodiversity corridor down in Parsons Street, and also the revitalisation of Todd Mall at the northern end, and look at bringing traffic one way or two ways through that northern end so we can get some more activity and some increased business and a little bit more economic viability.
That's Liz Martin there on the two projects that have been approved by the Alice Springs Town Council. And if you want to see the plans, they are also at the library. They will be on the screen in the Todd Mall. And as you heard there from Sue, there'll be a large ad in the Advocate. Something else that came up last night is safety and lighting in the Todd Mall. That's something else that you'd like to incorporate more of, I understand.
Yes, we would, and how it's done is pretty important. That one issue is this issue about junk and not having too many objects on the street. So when you put in some infrastructure, you have to think, what else can it do? Can it also provide lighting? Can it incorporate art? Can it be sat on, you know, so that it performs a few functions? Security and safety are really important. And really the best way to provide those is by having more people in the mall. So that's the main thing we're aiming for. But lighting's also important. And the quality of the lighting is important. People get a different message, I think, from the kind of lighting they see.
Sue, I'm so sorry. We are fast running out of time. We could talk about so much more, but if people